Of course. Okay, so I'd like to welcome you to this afternoon session with our Career Development Centre. So I'd like to introduce you to James Henton and James Nugent. They're going to be running this session today. If you've got questions that come up during the session, if you could please pop them into the Q&A box, and then they will get round to answering those as we go. So please use the Q&A rather than the chat. And I will hand over to James and James. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks, Keith. So much appreciated. Welcome everyone to the surprisingly Career Development Centre part of your day. I am James Henton. It's going to get confusing because there's two Jameses and we both have beards, but his is slightly more magnificent than mine. So that's how you're going to have to tell us apart. I am a career coach and employer engagement manager within the Career Development Centre. I specialise in the global industry section of career development, which you will find out more as we go through the session this afternoon. And I'll pass over to James to do a brief introduction.
Hi, thank you. So I am affectionately known as the other James, but I head up consulting careers. I've been at the business school for a little over 3 years and have a background in professional services, mainly KPMG and Deloitte, as well as working in some other industries as well. So it's a real pleasure to meet you at this early stage in your journey. And I just really hope that you find this session useful. So please do, pop in questions into the Q&A and get them answered while you have us both online.
Cool. Thanks, James. And I should have talked about my background as well. I've been at the school frighteningly nearly 8 years now. For my sins, I'm an ex-agency and in-house recruiter. Don't all do it me in the chat, please. And I had a previous career in finance with HSBC many moons ago now. But as James said, it's great to be here this afternoon and interact with you all. So to kick things off, just briefly run through what we're going to sort of talk about today. So as James mentioned, you can pop in questions in Q&A, but we will have time for you at the end for questions as well, so don't worry. We're going to be running through really some employment figures, which we've just collated from the outgoing class from last year, which we'll discuss with you in a moment. We're going to be talking about your career thinking, where you're at now, ask you some questions using Menti, which we'll allow you to log on to shortly. We'll talk about our offering as a career development centre as well and what you can expect for us, and hopefully to set you up for success as well at the end of the call, to give you some things to be getting on with before you start, because it will be here before you know it. So James, do you want to have a quick talk through some of these for us?
Yeah, of course, and we're delighted to share these slightly ahead of their official publication online. But a couple of the key information here: 88% received an offer within 3 months of graduation. Our base salary went up last year, which has been an actual trend, which we'd hope to see. It's been growing. And the other bit of data that we've actually started both collecting and reporting on this year is these switches. So often we talk about how many pivots people make or jumps, and 58% of the class last year switched sector, 66% switched location, and 64% switched function. So hopefully that gives you a bit of information, but also confidence that you can use this MBA journey to transform and change your career in a number of different ways. And as soon as we've got the latest report, we'll be publishing that on the website, so you can see some of the more granular detail. But we thought this was useful, and we're really keen to make sure that we do promote as much information as we can about the different journeys that we're seeing with our students.
And it's also great, and something that's not on the slide, but we do know the figures. So some of you out there might be looking to switch sector, location and function. And we have got, I think the figure is about 27% of students from the 20 to 22 cohort actually switched all three. So roughly a third of the class, which is fantastic. So if you are out there thinking about switching all three, it is definitely a possibility, but it is hard work. I'm not going to lie.
And I was just going to say with that last slide that you always have to take the data, with a pinch of salt. Different schools present data slightly differently. Some include, total reward package. Some focus on base salary. And I think the school as well has a real strength around, entrepreneurship, for example, and that those information doesn't necessarily gets covered in the employment report. It's not one of the standard outcomes. So hopefully it gives you information, but all of these things always need to be contextualized. And very briefly on this side, we've just got a bit of information about where people, ended up once they've gone through the MBA. So 32% in consulting. I can talk about that one briefly because I head up the consulting careers, but that is a high for the last 5 years. So we've had around 20 to 25% for about 5 years. And so it was nice that we jumped up last year. I do think that was a definite boon in the consulting industry globally. So we and other business schools did well. But I definitely think we've reached a new normal in terms of the numbers that are converting into consulting pathways. And the other thing just to flag is I know that 5% into impact. I mean, a lot of the roles in consulting and other areas do have a very strong impact, lens. So we split out the ones that were really clearly only impact related, but actually that maybe doesn't fully show the number of roles that had a real strong sustainability impact lens to them as well. But we wanted to at least get this on our slide so you could, have a view of the rough splits.
Yeah, and his impact, as you said, James, covers so many things. So you've got kind of impact investment as well, which sometimes can slot into the finance sector. So that's kind of pure impact roles, which might be looking at sort of impact in consulting could well end up in consulting figures as well as the kind of, as I mentioned, the impact investment. So just to give you kind of a flavour really on those sector allocations.
We actually, sorry, James, you had a question.
Sorry, no, go for it.
Yeah, we had a question live asking about how many people were willing to get into consulting from other backgrounds, were able to get into it. I mean, what I can say that would probably require a bit more analysis about people's, not only their journey, what they actually did, where they went from and to, but also their own, how many people willing to get into consulting. So that also relies on understanding a lot of data about what people were wanting to do, and that can change at various points. But what I would say is that, for example, 47% of students that come onto the program from consulting stay in consulting, so about half of that group. About 22% of those that come from a finance background go into consulting. Those that come from a global industries background, around 35% of last year's class went into consulting. And those that came from a technology background, around 14% went into consulting. So just gives you a bit of an idea about that from and to journey. But the employment report actually has, again, this year it's a bit new for us. We've got a new grid showing that from and to journey. So you'll be able to sort of map where you are maybe on that and the traditional paths. Sorry, James, back to you.
No. Cool, thanks, James. Yeah, and I think as James said, around some of these figures, take them with a pinch of salt. It's your journey is going to be unique to you, no matter where you come from, no matter where you're going to go to. So kind of it's sometimes reassuring for figures, but don't get hung up on them as well. But as I say that, I'm going to talk about more figures now. We're looking at salaries. So as you can see here, these are kind of job location, kind of average salaries. So I just wanted to kind of put a bit of a caveat on this. You can see when you're looking at the UK and Europe's numbers in comparison to that of North America is a lot higher. So those of you who maybe are in North America looking to come to the UK because it's wonderful over here, as we know, as that's where James and I are, do take into account that consideration that you are going to be paid less in the UK than you are in the US. It is what it is. We can't influence that. I have seen lots of students in the past say, what, James, I'm not going to be earning £150,000 in the UK doing the job that I was doing in the US. No, you're not, if I'm perfectly honest. So, but as you can see here, we've got some interesting figures around sort of UK and Europe, as we've kind of seen with the regional ones, and we'll come on to some more specific salaries around sector in a moment. But this just gives you an average salary with location in mind, not sector. So just setting that context for you there. And on the next slide, it says, if it works, this is the salary by sector, as you can see. So we've got some good averages which have come out there, and as we would have seen from the first slide with some data around sort of 83,000 is the average salary. We're on an upward trend overall, which is really encouraging and very good for us as a school. But as you can see, the min and max salaries, especially with impact there, and if you are looking at impact-led career, potentially you are going to be having to think about your salary and what's most important to you when it comes to that kind of thing. Is it the impact I'm making within the world, or is it, am I just here for the money? And other sectors obviously can give you that kind of better spread. Anything you wanted to say on these numbers, James?
Yeah, and it's just to say, I mean, the reason we added the min and max is just, the fact is you're now entering a kind of global, market, and some of you might have been very used to your home market. And that does mean there's going to be some interesting variations, as James was saying, between the US and the UK. And I always remember at GSK, I hired a new team member in the USA, who was essentially on the same salary as I was, just because of the exchange rates. And these are some of the things you'll have to think about. But clearly the min and max just shows you the range. And clearly if you're working, in some markets, 30,000 might be quite a good salary. So it does very much depend on the markets you're targeting. So these are all things you should be thinking about, pre-MBA in terms of where you're going to be targeting your journey. And I think what James said earlier was really critical, also about what's important to you. Everyone's going to have different red lines in terms of what they're looking for from the program. So, it's good to identify them, but also just to keep questioning them as the year progresses, and your red lines might change depending on your own situation. So it's good to think about it, but also, to keep reflecting on it as you get more information and more insight.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks, James. I think we've had another question on salary coming in, sectoral salary, but also factor in the geography. So the employment report will have all of this kind of data in, but I'm going to say, let's stop talking about data.
James, what I would say is, though, that both our employment report will have more information. When you join the school and get onto our systems, we've got absolutely great salary data that you can access through our platform, which is called Oscar, and you can run reports. How many people joined consulting in the US? What was the average salary there? And actually, some of the other business schools have open platforms where you can do this analysis as well. So I know INSEAD has a good salary kind of metrics. So the truth is, you are going to be, getting more of this information, and there'll be more sources of it as you go through.
And we will talk about a resource. MBA Exchange is a great source of information for MBAs. Surprisingly, it's called MBA Exchange. You will have access to that through your SBS email for free. When you get your emails, I can't quite remember when that is. I think it's soon. It might be today or the next couple of weeks. That's something you get provided free through us because you're an MBA, if that makes sense. And that's got loads of sectoral information, geographical information on salaries, on visas, all that kind of good stuff. So it's something you will learn on your journey, if that makes sense.
We've got more questions. So what kind of roles are covered under the tech sector? James, as our previous tech expert.
Anything, well, in tech, it's don't worry about the roles. When we're talking about the sector, it's more about those companies. So tech companies, so those percentages we saw earlier, that's, say you could work in a finance company, but say doing a tech role, that would classify you under finance, if that makes sense. So roles that's how we report it via company rather than role. In terms of what kind of roles are covered under the tech sector, that's a one-to-one conversation and some exploration we'd undertake with you, so don't worry too much about that. Got another question as well on US recruiting non-US citizens at SBS. So it depends, is the answer. It depends on the company in the US sponsoring H-1B visas. If I'm going to be, am I going to be too honest, James? You know me, I tend to be, or I tend to be a bit blunt in what I say, but I'm only being honest. If you are looking to get hired specifically in the US, coming to a UK school, I would question why. Other than that, it's a one-year MBA, which you might want to do. Companies do hire, but at the moment, it is an extremely difficult market to get hired in the US if you're not a US citizen. That's just the way it is. But it's not saying it's impossible. They do hire people over there, but you're better off, well, if you have got maybe a spouse that's from the US, or get in there another way. I know the H-1B visa is a bit of a challenge at the moment, so just bear that in mind when you're looking at those type of things.
Yeah, and just as a note on the consulting side, we do get people through, and we've got a couple over the years that go through kind of structured hiring, so things like the McKinsey, Bain and BCG during the MBA. But we also get a lot of success for when people finish the MBA in the UK and then travel home and develop and rework their networks. So I think there's a couple of routes that you go through, in particular for the US market. So yeah, just so you know, in the US, for example, we run our own networking panels and have a slightly different timeline. So when we've got sort of certain markets that have slightly different approaches, we try and kind of cater for that. We also had a question.
I'm just thinking, let's hold on questions for
Okay.
now, otherwise we're not going to get through this. So we will attempt to get to your questions, but we're also conscious we have got some things that are important for us to run through. So we're going to pause on questions for the moment. So this is where we're going to get some audience participation, which I always enjoy. So in a moment, I'm just going to flick across to the Mentimeter screen and I'm going to get you to scan and sort of log in to be able to answer some questions for us. So we're going to basically have a discussion about what's your post-MBA career goals. So did you want to, actually, let me flick across to that now. So hopefully you've all got a phone handy or can log into Menti. I'll give you kind of a moment to either scan that QR code. James is on it, you see, to see where he wants to go post MBA. So let's kind of have a quick look at these. So first question is going to be, what your post MBA career goal? So type in, use one word, use two words, try not to use sort of huge sentences if possible, please. But if you wanted to scan or use the code we've got there, if we can get some answers from you, that would be fantastic. Have you made sure it works, James? Can you put your answer in?
Oh, I didn't actually sign up. I was more demoing what you needed to do. Wait, okay. So we've currently got your slide. What's your current thinking? Were you switching it over to the Menti?
Oh, I've switched it to the Menti. That's not.
Yeah, sorry. I realised why I was struggling.
Okay, hold tight.
Hold tight, people.
Right. Hopefully you'll see this one now.
Yes, that's it.
There we go.
So you log into Menti. No, thank you for checking. So we log into Menti.
Give you a couple of moments to see scan that QR code or log in. And then we go to the first question, which hopefully, here we go. People are reacting, which means something's working.
Here we go. I'm in as well.
Excellent.
It's working.
So as I said, if we can get just some, here we go. We've got one answer. Explorer, excellent. Consulting, finance, transition to entrepreneurship. Already using words which we like, James, like accelerator and explorer. That's good to see.
That is very good. What are your post MBA goals? I see two Jameses there.
Yeah.
Transitioning, yeah. Tech,
impact,
salary, yeah. Exploring, yeah. VC.
So using some of those words like explore and accelerator and transition, we're going to talk about that next, if I can figure out how to share the screen properly when I go back. So that's really good to see. Impact, transitioning. Anything you pick out there, James?
I like the thing around sustainable impact, because one of the things that's been really interesting in terms of even my tenure at the business school, how, maybe when I joined, impact and sustainability was a really interesting growing area, but now it's so embedded in all of the firms that I'm dealing with. It's really nice that the two worlds have come together and it's become much more mainstream to be having those conversations. So it's lovely to see, that as part of everyone's, or as a kind of a big part of it. Trying to see, it keeps moving before I can read it. Love things like clean tech. That's a super interesting area, very fast growing, lots of interesting roles in there as well.
Entrepreneurship's a clear one as well, which is good. I like that. Right, let's flick back to talk more about some words which we've had. So hopefully you're going to be my guide here, James. Hopefully we're talking about current thinking now. Are we back on that slide?
Yes, we are. And I know some of you may have seen this already in some of our other presentations, but what really helps us, and we hope helps you, is to really think about where students are in their journey. And this isn't to pigeonhole you or to box you, but it just helps you think through what kind of work and support you might need at different stages. And the reality might be that you are exploring lots of things at the same time as well. So this isn't supposed to be a linear graph, and you might well be sitting in one or more of these boxes. But if I could just talk through some of these personas that we've identified with students. Number one is the explorer, and it was great to see that that was a word that came up quite frequently on the Wordle. But that's somebody who's coming to school, has lots of great ideas, but hasn't yet decided on, what their post MBA world is going to look like, what they're going to want to do, and using the MBA as a platform for exploration. I think this is a really fantastic mindset to maybe keep, because I was actually reading that I think 2 out of 5 MBA students, they did some research in 2018, I think, 2 out of 5 students end up in roles that they hadn't considered pre-MBA. So opening up to possibilities is a really important part of the program itself. The only thing I would say here is the danger of staying in the explorer mode the whole year might be that you don't maybe make progress that you might otherwise do. But it's an important sort of place to be. And one of the reasons we kind of use these personas is we also develop events to cater for these 3 groups. So sometimes when you join us, you'll say, look, if you're an explorer, this is a great event for you. It's a panel discussion. You're going to find out a lot more what it's like to live and work in this industry. Or we might say, are you committed to your consulting pathway? Here's a great event to look at the tools you'll need to be successful. So we have the explorer. The next persona we have is around the transitioner. So this is someone who comes to the school with a very clear idea about the journey that they want to go on and the destination that they want to find. That's supportive in some ways because it means you can really map out that pathway and that journey that you're on and be very intentional about how you use your time and what you do. But I suppose the only sort of caveat around that one might be, being too kind of laser focused on one thing and not being open up to other possibilities as well. And the final group that I think is important to talk about is our accelerators. So there's actually quite a few people that come to business school who are either sponsored or they're looking to stay in the sector, region or grade that they're in. And they're really looking for the MBA to be a real booster to their career so they can make that next step into a strategy role or to a more senior leadership role. And we also are very conscious about creating space and opportunities for those people to get support from us. As James knows, we tend to mainly focus on the explorers and transitioners because they're the people knocking on our doors with interviews next week or feeling a bit lost about where they're going to go next. But certainly we're very conscious that there's a good proportion of you who are here to really kind of accelerate that sort of personal growth. So there's a range of opportunities there for you as well. Anything you'd add there, James?
No, I think you've covered them really well. And I think one of the, well, we'll come on to another slide, which I'll talk about in a moment, but I know we started doing this in the Wordle actually, which is quite interesting, but I'm going to switch back to the Mentimeter. People have already started filling it in. Good stuff. People are ahead of me. So sort of next question, really, let's see where people are at now in terms of where they're thinking. It's always good to see where people are. So yeah, getting some good responses so far. Which is going to win? Usually it is the transitioners or explorers that tend to come out top here. We've got a good number of people on the call as well, so as this goes up it's going to be quite interesting. I've had nearly half the people respond. This is where our job gets infinitely more difficult, James, isn't it? When everyone feels an explorer.
Yes, and I do think, I mean, just as the numbers are coming in, I do think it's one of the big attractions of Side Business School. I really do believe we're a very broad church of interests, unbelievably international, unbelievably varied backgrounds. We're not necessarily, pumping people out into very particular industries, such as, some business schools. And I think that sort of makes it such an interesting, place to come and explore. But as James was saying, that said, it does make it a bit more challenging for us in careers, because we just have this wide variety of people coming through with lots of different thoughts and thinking about where they might want to be.
And the Explorer Transitioner Accelerator we wanted to bring this in to try and help people find a home as well, because if you are exploring, it's going to be not necessarily, it could be a very long journey for you because you're exploring different things. And we felt that some students who would be, but where are we? We're 1st of June at the moment. Some people who've been exploring, other people are getting jobs on the go. Oh, well, I haven't got a job yet. I haven't really been interviewing because I'm looking at experienced hire. It gives people that security that, oh, well, I'm an explorer, so I don't have to have it all figured out. I'm allowed to panic a little bit, not too much, but it gives you kind of that freedom for, actually, I'm an explorer, so it's okay. I'm not interviewing at the moment because I'm doing all of this good work. Okay, well, we've got some good responses there. Explorers and transitions accelerated. It's probably what we'd usually think, isn't it, James? I'd say.
Yeah, but I would just say, I think if it was a different business school, we might have more transitioners than explorers. But and that just reflects, as I said, that broad church that we bring into the school.
Cool, excellent. So this is where we are going to another question. I'm sure you've already. Students have already got on to the next mentee, and I'll share back in a second. But this is where we're going to be talking about which sector, kind of, if you want, post MBA. Again, it's a fairly broad church, just to kind of talk about global industry. Basically, global is anything that's not anything that's on there. So, like, I cover kind of sport, leisure, media, and everything like that. That would all come under kind of global industry, just to kind of set that. But let me flick back again to the next part. So can you see the mentee screen again, James?
Yes.
Yeah, perfect.
Whoa, finance were quick off the mark. Oh, go consulting.
Oh, consulting. Yeah, this is always interesting as well. Consulting is. Come on, everyone wants to be in global industry, really, James. They just don't know it yet. That's what I'm going to go with. See, now it's creeping up. I've said that.
Now you've said it, people are going there. No, it's very true, and I think in terms of the class, I mean, we have around 320 MBA students that join us, and each year I'd say about 70 of them are very committed to to a consulting journey. So even though we've got a bigger overall class than, let's say, somewhere like Cambridge Judge, they actually have more of their class interested in consulting. So this talks to that broad church that we have. But interesting. So tech. Yeah, I mean, the only other observation I have is that two quick things. Number one, tech's super interesting. And as we'll see on another slide, that is something that we have responded to in the last 12 months to make sure that we've got additional resource and, and space in there. And the other one is that entrepreneurship side. There's fantastic career stories and success stories within that. You don't always see them on employment reports because there is standardized reporting that all the business schools use, which doesn't really embrace entrepreneurship. And a lot of the employment reports, it's all based on, how quickly people have got jobs and what salaries they're on. And the truth is, entrepreneurs might not be seeing the returns on their work within 6 months of the end of the MBA. So I think that's a great space. And I think our entrepreneurship center was actually recently based #1 in Europe. So lots of really exciting opportunity and support there.
Yeah, cool. It's interesting to see those figures. Let me switch back screens to these other. I know that I'm aware there are some questions coming about entrepreneurship, which I will come to later. But yeah, let's crack on for the time being. So your development journey, which kind of couples with kind of the accelerated, explorer, transitioner, accelerator here. So really, we're covering off in these three areas, kind of where you would have periods of reflection, discovery, and activation, which are all perfectly fine for any of you who come into the school. You might spend, if you know exactly where you're going, you've got a clear, defined career plan, you might find yourself in activate a lot of the time. Reflection is something that's really important to do when you find out new information and when you are exploring. It's something that needs to be done, and discovery. I'm going to say a word of warning for reflection. It's a very important part of your career journey, and we kind of we enforce there your career journey because everyone is going to be completely different. reflection can sometimes be an excuse for I can't even say the word procrastination. So we see a lot of people also, we'll have a conversation. How are you getting on with your exploration? Oh, James, I'm doing this, that, and the other. Okay, so how are you moving this forward? What have you kind of put into practice? What are you activating? Oh, well, I'm still thinking about this. That can be used as a tool, because to not actually activate or not to do the discovery, you want to be spending a lot of your time in discovery and activation, but some time in reflection. So just, I suppose, a bit of a word of warning there. Don't kind of get caught up in that side of things. Anything else you'd say on that, James?
Yeah, and just to reflect, so the earlier slide we showed with the personas you might be in at any one time. You know, you're either exploring, you're committed to a transition, or you're going to be accelerating your career. What this is doing is talking about the process of career transformation and how you can use the MBA to go through that journey. So this is the journey that you'll be on at any one time. As James said, I think reflecting is one of those that is critically important, because if you don't have a good sense of your direction, your purpose, and where you're going, even if that means that, you know, if you're really interested in impact, that could be, you know, within finance, it could be in consulting. If you don't have that strong kind of North Star, it can make the MBA a bit overwhelming in terms of all the things kind of coming at you. But the reality is career transformation is as much about thinking as it is doing. And that's what the MBA is going to give you an opportunity to do lots of really interesting stuff and learn lots of interesting stuff. So we're constantly wanting you to both reflect and to kind of discover and activate where appropriate, so that you're constantly testing things out. There's a really good book written called, what is it called? Changing Identities. But anyway, what she does talk about is the fact that you try on different hats at a business school. And, you know, that's an amazing kind of place to be, that you have the freedom, the opportunity, the support to do that. So yeah, really recommend that you do kind of embrace that journey, but it is a journey. It doesn't always feel like it's, you know, it doesn't click along normally. Sometimes you'll go backwards, sometimes you'll go forwards. And that's absolutely, you know, fine in that journey. But my only call out here would be, you know, do things to get yourself out that zone, but you know, you'll shortly be invited to Canvas, for example, and there's an exercise in there about, you know, crafting your career narrative. I think all of those exercises just really help you with that North Star, because that will help you on this journey. If you're able to boil down, you know, what are the kind of core things that you're looking for, and it might change over the year, and that's absolutely fine as well.
That's what I was about to say. It's okay for it to change. You might want to think you want to go into consulting now, and then discover the world of global industry is a much prettier place. Or you might start in consulting and end up in finance. It's okay to be changing those. And coming back, sort of touching briefly on some of the questions around entrepreneurship. We don't have the figures to hand. They will be in the employment report once we publish that. Last year's, well, year before's employment report is still on our website, so you can still find that information. But it's interesting to see how many people over time end up in entrepreneurship or starting their own venture. When, as an example, an alumni from 2 years out, Jo Goodall, she's a good friend. She started Lunar App, which is a teen health application, which she came to me wanting to go into tech after coming from consulting. Had no idea when she was coming into the business school that she'd be starting her own venture with a classmate. 2 years down the line, she's now raising kind of £3 million for the next stage of her business. So everything's always on the table, really, isn't it, James?
No, exactly. And I think you see so many stories of that. And this slide just takes you through some of the leadership in the team. So you'll see me there. But this is essentially the way we're structured, that each of our core sector industry areas has a head of. So Dan looks after global industries, as well as impact as its own within that impact, just to highlight. As I mentioned earlier, there is a new vertical in the team that's set up about 6 months ago, which Caroline leads, which is around tech and e-commerce. So that is a brand new role, an additional resource that we're putting into supporting that group that want to go into tech. As you all know, this year was a bit of a mixed year within the tech space. But what's been interesting is, even though the really big players have been maybe shedding staff, there's still a lot of activity in boutiques and other places. So by the time you join the school, hopefully we'll have an updated view of what's happening in the market. I look after consulting, and my peerless peer, John Madwick, who's been for the school for a while, heads up finance. We also have Maria Dooley, who looks after alumni and members. And the two kind of key kind of leadership roles in the team as well is Jane Hayward, who looks after our talent development program, but also heads up all of the operations. So we all rely very heavily on Jane. And the head of the team is Joy Bussell, who hopefully, if you haven't seen or met already, will be very much involved in the launch, and you'll get a lot of opportunity to interact with her.
Fab. Thanks for running through those, James. Perfect. So this is where kind of we don't need you to tell us at this stage, but kind of it's always interesting to kind of think about what are the most important things and what you kind of think about. So we've got kind of, if like 6 key areas which we've kind of highlighted here, I suppose, to think about. So just, I suppose, a moment of reflection for yourselves to kind of think, oh, do you know, out of these 6, what is the most important to you? Do you think it is CV and cover letters? They do play a part in every application, well, most application processes, unless you're lucky enough to network straight into a job, which does happen where not even a CV exchanges hands. Qualifications and grades. So how important do you think is that you get a distinction on the MBA, that kind of thing? Number of applications you make, is that something, well, yeah, I need to play the numbers game, I need to apply for as many jobs as possible? Is it the interview technique, which is the most important factor for career success? Is it networking and relationships? So what am I doing out there in the market to gain industry knowledge, to network with alumni and peers and current classmates, which is often overlooked actually by a lot of MBAs, or knowledge and experience? What do you think, James, with yours there? And then I'll come back with my thoughts.
Well, it's just to say, as you were kind of alluding to it in the talk, it really depends on the individual, but it can also depend on loads of other factors. So, you know, within consulting, there is quite a lot of structured hiring going on, which is slightly different from maybe GI, for example. And for that, you need to be really excellent at all the stages, you know, from maybe having people refer you to having a great CV and cover letter to doing brilliantly at each stage of the interview. But it can also very much depend on markets. So even speaking to a lot of the students that get into MBB firms in the US, for example, McKinsey, Bain and BCG, you know, they leverage very heavily the referral process and having people advocating for them. In other markets, you don't need those referrals quite as much, and they run a much more independent process. So it can really depend, and everyone's journeys is going to be important. But the last thing I was going to say is that what I found interesting is that what makes someone successful is usually based on any number of these. And for one person, it might be them CV might have opened up a door. For another person, it might be that they've networked an event and that's opened up an opportunity. So my advice is just to try and focus on all of the different elements to perform at your best, because you don't know which one of them is going to convert for you. Just an observation. Yeah.
I think for me, the most important one on there is number 5, so networking and relationships. We all have, all of us are different in terms of extroverts, introverts. You'll probably guess where I am on that. But if you don't network, you will not be as successful as your peers that do. That's fact, in my opinion. You need to grab the experience of being on the MBA kind of by the horns with all the different people you're going to meet. I'm sure on day one, if you all stood up in there, you'll be in Nelson Mandela Lecture Theatre if you haven't visited us and seen it yet. On day one, I'm sure we'll probably get you to do some kind of exercise, which is the stand up if you work in tech, right? And who wants to go into tech after the MBA? Those are all people you need to network with internally. I kind of mentioned it earlier that not enough MBAs get to know each other, because it's such a crazy experience here over the year. There is lots of networking to do. It's building relationships. For me, this is going to be a key area for you to be focusing on when you're here. Again, I find CVs and cover letters, even though they are important in an application process, don't procrastinate by trying to get the perfect CV. News for you is your CV is never finished. It's never complete. It will never be done. So don't waste a lot of time on trying to get that perfectly right at the start of the year. So I guarantee it's going to look very different. But it looks very different now for students and coaching sessions I had this morning from when they started in September to where they are now on the 1st of June. So do remember in the back of your head, always have that kind of networking relationships. Who am I speaking to in the market? Who am I finding that information from? Who can I connect with? Who can I have more conversations with to develop my thinking. And that rich tapestry comes together as you move through the MBA.
And can I just add one other
Yeah,
thing, James? And I think it's very true. And I hadn't previously worked at a business school, but the reality of doing an MBA and having the Said network as well as the Oxford network, the #1 university in the world, does open up a kind of whole hidden job market that you may never have even realized was there before. And that comes through having relationships. And you'll be surprised how that Oxford brand and Oxford network and Side Business School network open doors for you and opportunities that you might not have been able to access for. So in many ways, me and James, we repeat the same things, and it's really about trying to give you the confidence to play in that space, because if you play that game well, it opens up opportunities and roles that you haven't, considered before. And I know I'm pitching something that will get covered in depth when you join us, but Dan Kiernan did post this on LinkedIn, so I think it's out there. But definitely, if you're nervous about networking, we really support you on what's called the 2-hour job methodology, which will really support you in terms of the practical steps you take and how to do it. So 2-hour job search, very much recommended reading when you join the program.
Cool, thanks, Shane. So briefly kind of talking about building blocks which you can kind of start on, if you like, in your journey when talking about these various areas. So I'm just going to pick a couple from this. So the careers toolkit, which you will have access to, I think, from next week, isn't it, James? We go live with that on sort of Canvas.
Yeah, the portal and parts of Canvas are going to be made available in the next, I think it's probably next week.
Yeah. So throughout the year, we kind of help it's a mixture of online content, workshops, and one-to-one coaching, as it says there. So we can help you with that career decision making to help you make choices about what you want. But it is you coming back to your journey. You need to make those decisions. We can't do it for you. The industry knowledge, kind of, we have that, as well as our industry advisors, which is actually on the slide, which we'll come on to in a moment. And kind of how they hire, what's happening in the sector, but also it's for you to build that knowledge as well and deal with that. Interacting with employers, we have employer sessions on campus, but that's still a very small part of the puzzle. We can't get every single employer in the world into business school. You need to make it happen yourself, again, through that networking and exploration to help encourage you. We only have a very small piece of the pie when it comes to employers which will hire MBAs on a global basis. So that's just kind of some building blocks to start with, which we'll work with you throughout the year in various kind of forms of content, from workshops to online. So this is really explaining more about, you're on a 12-month program, but really it's probably 9 months, isn't it, by the time you finish up for summer term. Career transitions potentially take a hell of a lot longer than 12 months, which is why it's so important, which, as we've highlighted here, June to August are pre-arrival. We are going to be available for one-to-one sessions in advance. There is some welcome webinars which you will join over the coming months as well. So this kind of just highlights there that you need to be starting before you actually get here in September. Otherwise, you're already potentially going to be behind. So this just highlights that part of it. Again, similar slide, but this just talks more about maybe hiring cycles. So the program will start in September. We will have what we call structured hiring, like big programs which come onto campus perhaps, or application windows will open before Christmas, where you'll be involved in structured hiring processes, which is definitely in global industry and sort of technology. We've got some of those structured hiring processes. You then move into internship hiring, I suppose, a little bit later on in the year. So applications typically from February through to, well, which are just closing at the moment. If you're looking for internships for credit, you'll find out more when you hear, but this is kind of that's the second iteration, if you like, of hiring. So you have structured internships, then you come to post-graduation and experienced hiring. It says April onwards here. I'd probably push that to a little bit later, if I'm honest. In my area, I think you're going to be applying from now, really, if you're here at the moment. So it's those 3 different types of structured, internship, and experienced hire. And then post-graduation, which is when most MBAs find their jobs. Most MBAs who are currently on the program will not secure a role until September, October, November time, and even into the following year as well. So I'm going to sort of word of warning or set an expectation here. Don't think you're going to have your career wrapped up before Christmas. Only a very small number of students will have that through structured hiring. Anything else you'd add, James?
Yeah, it's just to say, the team laugh at me because it's kind of my motto. But you'll find the MBA in particular careers might feel like both a sprint and a marathon. So there'll be times when you're prepping really hard and you're going at it full out, and maybe things don't convert for you, and you've got to just save the energy and the focus and the drive to keep that journey, going for maybe a slightly longer period than you might expect. The reality is there's only so many vacancies in structured hiring. The number of vacancies in experienced hiring is infinite, really. Yeah. All employers are hiring. So there is always going to be a limit that sort of secure roles through the structured hiring process. And it's just to maintain that, positive energy. And I think the people who do well keep that positive forward momentum through the program, even when they, hit little hiccups or bumps on the road. And I think the aim of doing this session is just to show you to sort of trust in the process, and also, what we know the process is going to look like based on, what's happened over the last 5 years.
And this last slide around the timelines, if that makes sense, again, just reinforces that if you get involved pre-arrival, there's all the stuff which goes on campus, and then there is still support with you after the program ends around our boost program if you haven't secured a role, and the ongoing alumni support which you get for life, really, to help you develop your career further. I'm also conscious of time, so I am rattling through this a little bit so we've got time to answer for Q&A. So we offer a number of co-curricular programs like the Finance Lab. If you are in the finance space and have thought about that already, you probably all know about it. You need to apply to join Finance Lab. It's not just a program that's open to all, unfortunately, because there's limited spaces. We've got Impact Finance Lab. Again, I'm just going to rattle through these. This just gives you an idea of what we provide as a co-curricular program. I'm not going to go into detail. Asset Management Masterclass, the Consulting Development Program, which James leads on to help people get in careers in consulting. The Product Management Roadmap, very hot right now in terms of a job title, product manager. So we help you with that, help you in knowledge and frameworks. Impact Intro series, where surprisingly it focuses on impact. So we run that on campus for you. Supply Chain Futures, if that's an area of interest. The Experienced Hire series, which I lead, around helping students find roles in experienced hire season. Data-driven decision making, so we help you with Excel, SQL, Python, that kind of thing. So we do support you with that as well. Our talent development program, which again helps through various externals coming in, Olympic athletes, all sorts come in and give you talks on how to develop, and loads of really interesting stuff around there. And lastly, on that kind of piece, industry advisors we work with. So this picture was taken, was it last week? That week before last, James?
2 weeks, yeah.
This is kind of us with some of our industry advisors, and they are industry experts throughout all sectors, from finance, consulting, impact, global industry, who have been in the industry for many a year and now kind of could be alumni, they could be just people who have got really interesting experience we want to build upon and use that for our MBAs. They are here to support, and we bring them in to help you. Anything else you'd say on IAs, James?
No, apart from, as you were saying, they're an extension of our team. We tactically use them as and where we think they're going to add value. And in consulting, for example, I have an IA that's an ex-BCG recruiter. So she's super useful with helping us do CV reviews because she's seen thousands of them. So that's an example of where it's great to have an IA, to come in, add that expert insight, and then, sits in our network. And as James gone on, I mean, just to talk through a couple of our success stories and why we think they were successful on the program. I think what binds all of them is a real curiosity and an open mindset and a positive mindset. And what also binds all of them is they worked. I'm not going to say that I often think career transformation takes, a number of people, a village, if you like. But I do think careers sit quite firmly in the center of that network, and the students that don't engage with us, I think, maybe miss out on that opportunity. But someone like Michael, for example, he joined us from the Royal Navy. I remember speaking to him about 6 months before he even joined the MBA, and I wasn't even working at the business school at that point, and he found me and reached out and had a conversation. So he was super committed from absolutely day one. Even though he'd done more research than most students, he was still the student that attended every event, every case coach practice session we did, every presentation, every ask for help, he was there. And he managed to secure a role with an MBB firm in London, which is a challenge. London's a very popular market. But I think he just demonstrated a really conscientious, thoughtful approach to for his career transition. But also, you know, if he hadn't got in through structured hiring MBB, he had his other options lined up. So he wasn't relying, if you're just aiming for one target, getting into Google or Amazon, that's a really small target to hit. So you need your aspirations, but you need a broader strategy as well.
Yeah, he was someone who was super engaged. He was always one that was in the business school at 8 o'clock when we get in, and sort of still around at events late at night. So he's put in the hard yards to get that role.
Yeah, he was the most present. You'd see him everywhere.
Yeah, definitely. Conscious of time, do you just want to pick one more, James? I mean, I'll quickly talk to Juan, who's kind of, his target was impact. He has secured a role at, oh God, the company's just escaped me because my memory is truly awful. But basically, he applied for that. I'm not sure if it's a DC advisory in the impact space. He applied during the MBA program, applied for 4 roles there, didn't get it. And he actually secured his dream job in impact a year after finishing the MBA. So it may not sound like it's a success story, but it's the exact role in the exact company he wanted when he started the MBA. It just took him a while to get there through being consistent, being present, continuing with his networking, not giving up, and finally getting the aspirational career he wanted. So that's not it's a success story. Well, I think it is, because he got there. But this is, again, us highlighting to you, career transitions are not 12 months. They can be longer. So that's just not a cautionary tale, but it's a tale of success. But it can take you a while to get there. So this is where we're going to go to some questions, because we've still got a couple of slides at the end just for your next steps. So I know that we've had some questions. I can quickly answer some of these now. So any history with sports organisations? Yes. We kind of work with Chelsea, Liverpool, NFL, depending on what sport you want. I look after sport as a sector. We've had, for the first year ever, a sports club this year for students who want careers in sport. So yes, it is your answer to that one. What's the next one? Pursued to go into entrepreneurs and do startup. That's in the employment report. I haven't got figures to hand, but it is there. But I wouldn't worry about figures and data. It's up to you. You can do whatever you want. That's me being eternally optimistic.
That's your motivational speech.
Yeah, you might not even think you want to be an entrepreneur, but you might end up doing it. Do you want to take the next one, James?
So at the moment, I don't think we report on joining bonuses and performance bonuses. That's something I think we do collect, but we haven't yet added it. So I don't think you'll find that on the employment report. But you know, the key thing is the base salary is what we focus on and what all business schools get compared against. But yeah, that is something that we probably would like to collect in the future. So in honesty, don't think we have it.
No. What do you do? Well, we've got the Entrepreneurship Centre, which is its own individual centre which talk about entrepreneurship. There'll be the EP, so the entrepreneurial project you do when you get here. So there is so much available when you get here. Yeah, we support those careers 100%.
Do you get access to a personal mentor? So the way we currently run the scheme is we have a completely open door policy, and you can meet any of us in the team as many times as you need to. I do think there is some thinking about maybe allocating particular coaches, but you'll probably find your own tribal coach, you know, having had those discussions. So I think our approach is very much open door, work with the right coach. You know, often I'll say, well, look, you've used me for X, but this person's the real expert in Y. So at the moment we allow that open door policy. It might change in the future, but that's what we currently do.
Cool, thanks, James. Start preparing for recruitment investment banking now. I would book an appointment. Our appointments should be up on Oscar over the next few days when you get access. I book in with either John Madgwick, Ben Leslie, or Sean Toomey to discuss that, but you need to get going quickly for investment banking. Oxford Career Service are nothing to do with us. They cover Central University only. We work completely independently from them, so you do not get access to that website. We have our own suite of support available, which will be rolled out to you in the coming weeks. Estimated number of roles available during structured hiring period. No, I can't. Again, for me, you're focusing on the wrong information here. It's not about the roles available. It's where you want to end up. It's about your journey and how you prepare for it. I wouldn't even entertain trying to figure it out. I mean, in experienced hire, as James mentioned earlier, that infinite amount of jobs available. Structured hiring, it doesn't matter. You're going to go where you want to go.
Yeah, the one I'll pick up at, I know it's out of order slightly, but at the end we've got what support you offer for reflection. And I think that comes in multiple sources. When you get access to the system, there are exercises there to help work out your career narrative and your personal pitch and about where you're going. That's a great start. We also run some sessions through Launch around career visioning, and that's actually something I'm working on over the summer to offer more of that kind of career direction and support. But in reality, probably the best way we support people with that reflection is through our two things. Number one, through our one-to-one support that we offer and our open door policy. And number two, our colleague runs this talent development program. And within that, you get access to some personality psychometric assessments. You can be profiled and you can have a debrief on that, as well as access to executive coaches that can support you as well. So I think it's a combination. Some of the stuff we do, one-to-one support, and also the talent development program.
Cool, thanks, James. Is it possible to prepare for both consulting and investment banking at the same time? Yes, it is, but you've got a lot of work to do. So yeah, there's no, again, emphasizing your career journey, but just bear in mind how busy you're going to be. Hence, sort of start now. We're not going to be sharing these presentations, I'm afraid, no, but you will get access to so much stuff on Canvas over the coming weeks, so I wouldn't worry about that.
I think they've got their next session in 2 minutes. So do you want to just
let's wrap up. So thank you all for asking questions. Sorry if we didn't get to you. You'll still have plenty of time to ask them when you're here. So as we said, you'll be here before you know it. So it's only 122 days, frighteningly, before you're actually here. So do focus on these things. So what can you do before you start? Attend the welcome webinars. Book in one-to-one sessions, as I said, which will be available on Oscar over the coming week. We're opening sessions, I think, from the 5th or 6th of June. So you'll be able to book in one-to-one with everyone in the Career Development Centre. There's always details there as to who to book in with. Get your pre-arrival work done on Canvas, because I guarantee you won't have time to do it when you start, because it's Michaelmas is crazy. Establish the relationships with people in your target sector. So start your networking now. Reach out to alums in the companies you want to be working for, get that going as soon as you can, and start to make some choices. They can be the right ones or wrong ones, it doesn't matter. You can reflect and you can get it wrong when there's still time to do it, but start making some choices. Anything you'd add, James, before we quickly wrap up?
No, I think you've covered everything. So really looking forward to working with you all, and yeah, delighted to connect.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, James and James, for that really, really useful webinar there. Really appreciate your time. And thank you for all the great questions, everybody. I'm going to have to wrap this up quite quickly because we've got our next session starting at 3 o'clock, which some of you may be joining for the Finance Lab. Thank you again, and end it there.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.